in line with Islam in practice. So I think many of them find peace because there really is peace. I mean, if we believe, as I do anyway, that God is merciful and he does try to guide people, even from other religions, towards the truth, even within that faith, away from shirk, for example, I believe that because I believe God cares about people.
In the Quran, we know that Jesus ﷺ gave the good news of coming of the last prophet ﷺ. In your reading of the Bible, have you ever come across an information like this?
Yes. Often in the earlier Gospels, not in John, the least historical, in the earlier Gospels, you get Jesus talking about the Son of Man who is to come. Not himself. He's talking about in the third person, there is someone else. Now, Christians often say, oh, well, Jesus is talking about himself there. But it's a bit odd, because Jesus talks about himself and then he switches to the third person and speaks about one like a Son of Man who is to come. People like Bart Ehrman and others, the American New Testament scholar, have said Jesus is talking about someone else who is to come. The word Muhammad is not mentioned in the Greek of the New Testament, absolutely. And because these Gospels have been corrupted and changed, but we can still see strong hints that Jesus was speaking about someone else, and that was historical. And even in John, actually, chapter 14 and so on, we see hint of someone else also being spoken of, other than Jesus, who was to come. So the fingerprints are there, even in the Gospels we have now.
What was the main thing that convinced you that Islam is 100% the truth?
The thing that I discovered, which totally impressed me unexpectedly, was the life and teaching of the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace. You know, when we talk about great historical figures on British television and Western literature, you know, they go from, you know, Plato and Caesar, Julius Caesar, and they'll talk about Alexander the Great, and then they'll jump to Napoleon, Bonaparte, and all. They never mention the Prophet Muhammad, never mention him. And I'm thinking, this is extraordinary. He comes from the same part of the world that Jesus did, that Moses did, and yet he's ignored. And if you look at his seerah, his life, which is well authenticated, this is not myth. We know he really existed, the most extraordinary human being. About this man, the teaching there, it felt very familiar to what I read in the Gospels. In Luke, for example, or in Matthew. There's a lot of true stuff in the Gospels still, I think. So when I saw the teaching of Muhammad, peace be upon him, I recognized the hallmarks of an authentic spiritual teacher. And that was the problem for me, accepting Islam, because I saw the connection between Jesus and Muhammad. If Jesus was a prophet, so was Muhammad. If Moses was a prophet, certainly Muhammad was, because they're the same, they're interchangeable. They were both heads of nations, they were generals, they were lawgivers, they were spiritual guides, they were fathers, except the difference is Moses was sent to Israel and Muhammad was sent to all of mankind.
What impressed you the most about our Prophet ﷺ?
One thing that really impressed me, amongst many things, was the day that he and his companions and the Ummah rode into Mecca, when they finally claimed Mecca back and they conquered Mecca, and the way he treated his enemies. Many people in the West would have very negative views of Islam. They think, oh, well, I'm sure Muhammad slaughtered his enemies or something. What did Joseph do when he was like the second most powerful man in Egypt, and he had his brothers who had betrayed him and sold him into slavery and left him for dead? How did he treat these nasty people? He forgave them. He showed them mercy. And this was the example the Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace, explicitly referred to when he conquered Mecca from the pagans. From a position of power, total power, he could have destroyed them and he didn't. He showed them mercy. This says something about the character of the Prophet, and I just wish the West knew about that. The Muslim world knows about it, but the West doesn't, and it is infinitely the poorer for not knowing that.
What was your purpose in life before Islam, and what is it after Islam?
Well, I've always been, my purpose in life before Islam is still the same now, in a way, to seek the truth wherever it is found. I don't believe I need to go beyond Islam, but I'm still searching for the truth within Islam. I'm still trying to learn. But before that, I was still searching, but now I've kind of arrived home, but I'm still seeking within that ever greater knowledge and understanding.
In the world, we see an increase in atheism, and many people are also leaving Christianity, especially in the UK and Europe. When you look at the current situation, do you see the same trend with Islam as well?
I had an academic on, Professor Linda Woodhead. She's a professor at King's College here in London. She's a leading expert on religions in Britain. She's a sociologist of religion. And she was commenting on the census that had just been published a couple of months ago. Religion in Britain is declining, And it has been on very steep decline for a number of decades now.